Warzone Solos is possibly the most intense of all the Battle Royale modes that this game has to offer. You are all alone, faced with having to outplay 149 other players in order to get that win. If you make a single mistake, are ambushed by just one player, or happen across a camper, that can be the end of your game. No one has your back, it's just you and your skills, battling it out against the odds in order to come out on top. If you want to have success in Warzone Solos, then you need to know the best tactics that will give you an edge over the enemy players. The gameplay I'm going to be breaking down in this video is a perfect example of how a smart playstyle and good strategy can deliver you an easy win in solos. I'll be covering my thought processes, the different aspects of my playstyle and strategy, as well as individual tips and tricks that can give you an advantage over your enemies in Warzone Solos. This match kicked off at this area south of TV station. I know the layout and buildings very well, which makes fighting here much easier for me. I also hate static games. I have no problem with players who want to take a more reserved approach to solos, as it's a legitimate tactic that does work, but I prefer to stay on the move as much as possible. Landing towards the edge of the ring means I'm going to have to spend my match constantly on the move, rather than waiting for enemies to come to me. This is just personal preference though. I find that being on the move simply better suits my playstyle. Now, right away I've heard an enemy player drop in beneath me. Letting this player grab decent weapons and armour is only going to make my life harder. This is why I decided to go straight after him. Rather than playing predictably, sitting on the rooftop waiting for him to come out, I can make the most of a dead silence to flank him in order to take him by surprise. As you can see, he's caught totally off guard, which allows me to pick up the kill. Now that I know I can enjoy some kind of safety, it means I can gather up loot in order to get myself a loadout as quickly as possible. Loadouts in solos are perhaps more important than in any other mode. Having Ghost alone can be the difference between life and death, as everybody runs heartbeat sensors in this mode. Unfortunately though, this isn't a straightforward thing for me, as I've had a scuffle with another player who I know is still nearby. For this reason, you can see that I buy myself a loadout, but don't call it in immediately. Instead, I've moved up to a much safer position that will allow me to call it in peace. It's always worth making that bit of extra effort to keep yourself safe in solos, as taking unnecessary risks can end your game very quickly. As much as I like going for kills in any mode, it's simply not worth the risk until I have my loadout. Once I've got my loadout and reliable growl, I'm in a much better position. The problem remains though, I still don't know where the player that I challenged earlier has gone. People tend to play extremely conservatively in solos, as everyone is aware that, once you die, that's pretty much game over. For this reason, I'm fairly confident that this player is still in the general area, which is going to force me to play much more carefully. Grabbing a UAV confirms that this player is still lurking nearby. I just want to say that throughout this gameplay, you're going to see me pop UAVs in order to hunt and track enemy players. This is the exact reason that I place such a massive amount of importance on getting a loadout quickly that has Ghost equipped. UAVs can leave you completely exposed. Ghost prevents this, and I think it's a mandatory perk for anyone who is seriously trying to pick up a win in a game of Warzone Solos. This UAV is what allows me to set myself up in an ideal position to pick off and surprise this solo player. By stealthily reaching the roof, it's a simple waiting game where I just have to wait for the gas to force him to move towards me. I could have pushed him earlier, but it's always better to engage an enemy when you know you have the upper hand, rather than leaving it up to chance. It doesn't take much for a gunfight not to go your way. Hence why you're always better off creating a situation where you know you have the advantage. Now, I prefer a game with a bit of action in it. I like getting into gunfights in order to improve my skills and add a bit of excitement to the game. That's why I'm making my way to a bounty during my rotation towards the safe zone. Surprisingly, I found myself hunting an enemy just around the corner from me, which made things pretty interesting. Stadium doesn't offer a lot of cover and is surrounded by open ground, so moving to an easily defendable position wasn't really an option. The solution was to simply lie in wait. This player would be forced to rotate past me due to the approaching gas. You should always use caution when pursuing a bounty like this, as whilst you have an idea of where your enemy is, they can also gauge your position based on the warning meter. Playing to cover and patiently waiting for the right moment to engage is always a better option than rushing in headfirst. Getting this kill gives me a decent amount of cash to stock up on self-revives, UAVs and everything else. Whenever I use a buy station and buy a UAV, I always call it in immediately. Doing this is what saves me from certain death right here. So many players just love to camp buy stations in order to pick up easy kills. It's a dirty tactic, but it works. If I'd have just bought myself some equipment and not called it in, that would have been my game over right there. Knowledge is power in solo Warzone, which is why you should make the most of UAVs whenever you can. You never know when an enemy is right around the corner. There's also very little point in just saving your UAVs for a later point in the game, as if you don't use them, you might never get to. Using UAVs to check your surroundings whilst you plan your movements, especially when going into open ground, is always a good idea, if you've got the cash to spare. After this rather exciting series of events, I've got to make my rotation towards the next zone. I would always advise sticking to covered areas whenever possible. You absolutely do not want to be running out in the open like I am now, if you can possibly avoid it. Sometimes you can't though, and that's why I'm sprinting and praying that nobody can see me, as I've got no possible way of defending myself. Luckily though, I've got a recon drone that I can use to figure out where nearby players are. This information means that I can make a safe rotation further into the safe zone, without having to worry about being caught out by any nearby players. This is what brings me into port, an area famous for its long lines of sight and variable cover. I know this neck of the woods very well thanks to plenty of matches here in Ground War. Fighting in the buildings here is not something I'm confident in. There's too many levels, too many dark corners for enemy players to be hiding in. But by the same token, I also know which areas of this section of the map that I'm more effective in. Sticking to the edges of port lets me come in with the gas, offering me a layer of protection. Building up map knowledge is something that will happen naturally over the course of your time in Warzone, and it is something that will permanently help you, no matter what Warzone mode you're playing. Knowing how to fight in an area, which spots to avoid, where the optimal cover is, and where the lines of sight are, can really give you an advantage in Warzone. This tactic of coming in with the ring is exactly what allows me to catch this player off guard. I can pick up this kill without any hassle, as I'm forcing this player to engage me whilst he's out in the open with no cover. This sort of positioning, forcing your enemies to fight you from a disadvantage, is what will make gunfights consistently easier for you to win. This is the exact reason that I'm pushing for the rooftops in this next zone, as it gives me an incredibly strong position over the enemy players remaining. This high ground is easy to defend, offers a good view of the rest of the map, and also allows me to figure out my next rotation from relative safety. For the same reason in the next ring, I push up to the office building in order to keep my high ground advantage for as long as possible. This ring though is where things get pretty intense. The next zone forces me to cross a huge open expanse to a cliff top. I've got no cover to use, and anyone who's already on or at that cliff will not struggle to pick me off. I'm already being sniped at, which only makes things harder. Coming in with the ring here is my best option, as I'm relying on it forcing the other players to also move, hopefully causing them to fight and giving me enough of a distraction that I can make my rotation safely. Before any of that happens though, I'm suddenly dealing with a surprise player that I just didn't expect to encounter. This gunfight has nothing to do with tactics and is just a testament as to why accuracy and player movement are very important in Warzone. The only reason I won this gunfight was because my accuracy was slightly better. There's no time to loot though or do anything else, as now the gas is forcing me to charge straight at a minimum of one enemy sniper who is determined to put me down. In this scenario, crossing the open field is still the only option. You can see me repeatedly stop to suppress this sniper. A few bullets is all you need to knock a sniper's aim and force them to reposition. I'm not going for the down or the kill. I'm just trying to buy myself enough time to get to the cliffs. This works, but now I'm stuck at the bottom of a cliff with hardly any cover. To make things worse, I'm caught out during a reload as a player literally falls down right in front of me. Chucking a C4 is what wins me this gunfight. It means I don't have to reload and I can drop him with the last of my magazine. Now, right here, you're going to see the smartest play I made in this entire match. Hiding. There's no way I can get up to the top of the cliffs as the gas has cut off all the routes up. I can't possibly fight anyone up there as my low ground position will make killing them impossible. In situations like this, you need to recognise your disadvantage and figure out what your best option is. Going for an outright gunfight here would not have ended in my favour. But, by lying down and hiding, I can force this player to come down from his high ground. By waiting for the gas to come in, this player jumps right over me, giving up his high ground and giving me an easy kill for the win. This gunfight, as well as the rest that you've seen in this gameplay, are all great examples of how tactics and playstyle are the biggest factors when it comes to getting a win in Warzone. Playing intelligently, always giving yourself the advantage, recognising the way the zone affects players and how this map works is what will consistently allow you to come out on top. There were plenty of times in this match when things could have gone either way, and somewhere I probably should have lost. But, by using the right tactics and strategy, I'm able to pull off a win. The key is to learn to adapt the various tactics and strategies that I've shown you to the diverse range of situations that you can find yourself in Warzone solos. Learn how to bend each situation to your advantage, figure out how to get an edge over your opponents, and always play it smart. Rushing in without thinking or pinning your game on some luck is not the way to go about getting a win.